This week we have been talking, and I've deliberately talked this week about it, to do with the meth issue that we have in this country. The latest statistics released would suggest that New Zealand's consumption of meth, as determined by wastewater testing, has almost doubled in the last half of the last year, which is an extraordinary statistic when you think about it. And that's relatively uniform throughout the country. So even though we've talked on this particular show about Northland, and yesterday we talked to the National Party MP for Northland, Grant McCallum, about the meeting between tribal elders from Ngāpuhi and members of the Coalition Party in Wellington, and what might come out of that, I didn't get a clear view or an inclination that anything's going to change soon. And I still ask the question I've asked all along: why would methamphetamine consumption double in this country? And I'm talking throughout all of New Zealand, when we know the iniquitous effects of, it is clearly obvious that there are significant social deterioration exists as a consequence of addiction to methamphetamine, and that it is a pernicious drug ripping itself through various communities, and particularly, it has to be said, Maori communities in this country. So is there anything that can stop it? Is there any set of policies that might arrest this consumption? Or are we destined to go on a route in which eventually methamphetamine in this country will become as much of a plague, if it isn't already, as the opioid crisis that has killed so many in the United States of America? Joining us to talk about that is Sarah Helm from the New Zealand Drug Foundation. She's its Executive Director, and she joins us now. Sarah, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Just tell us a little bit about the New Zealand Drug Foundation, will you? Your background, how you were formed, and what your, if you like, aegis, philosophy, intent is.
Yeah, so we've been around since the 1980s. We were set up with a view to trying to influence and create more evidence-based drug policy, and still trying our very best to achieve that in New Zealand. We're a non-profit, and we work along a whole lot of different issues, and definitely very concerned about the increase in methamphetamine consumption, particularly in regards to what appears to be an increased consumption among people who are already primarily using it. So we're seeing for the first time a growth in the amount and frequency that people are consuming, also for a very long time.
Yeah, I have been around perhaps as long as the New Zealand Drug Foundation in political terms, but initially you were for liberalisation of cannabis laws, I think, in this country on the basis that, we were trying to solve a problem that wasn't there. Do you regard methamphetamine consumption as an entirely different beast, do you?
I think more I would categorise the foundation as trying to get a drug policy that creates the perfect or the best possible set of regulation rather than just liberalisation for the sake of it. So alcohol, for example, some might say has been too liberalised, for example, and then you have other substances that are completely banned, and all we have up our sleeve is policing. So there's lots of different strategies, and our goal is reducing harm. We don't just do policy stuff either. I should have said that we do a number of frontline things. We're running a program for part of the community that uses meth at the moment. We're in touch with the sector all the time. We recently pulled together a couple of hundred people from our sector to talk about issues like this very one that you're talking about today. So, yeah, really keen to help inform the discussion that you're having here.
Well, you had a study a couple of years ago, I think, in which you described alcohol and methamphetamine as the two most harmful drugs in New Zealand. As you mentioned, one of them's legal, one of them's not. One of them's been around for, probably tens of thousands, thousands of years anyhow, and the other one hasn't. But I'm interested in methamphetamine, we'll come to that. Alcohol's another issue for another day. And in that
Mm.
study, you say that only 1.3% of New Zealanders used illicit amphetamine type stimulants at least once in the previous 12 months. Now, I would suggest that what's that 98.7% of New Zealanders haven't used it. Has those numbers increased, or as you say, is it just that same people are using more?
Yeah, so it doesn't appear to, so the wastewater doesn't exactly align with the bits of evidence that we do have that come from either the New Zealand Health Stores survey or Massey University run a pretty good different data set as well. But what those data sets are showing is that there's been an increase in the frequency that people are taking it. So we've had a shift, for example, and we haven't had this kind of a shift for a very long time, so it is marked. We've had a shift in daily use from about 19% of people who use methamphetamine to 29%. We've had an increase in weekly
Wow.
consumption from 16 to 25%. And actually, sadly, because not all methamphetamine use, so it's not a one hit, you're hooked situation, actually. Many people use it very infrequently, and that's been the greater number for a long time. And that's actually declined in the last year, the number of people who only use it once or twice a year. So it's concerning because it probably represents an increase in addiction and an increase in the number of sort of acute experiences people will be having, heart issues, psychosis, those kinds of problems.
Just take me through the stats again. Did you say 19 to 29% of what? Adult New Zealanders take it daily, did you say?
It's grown from 19% in 22, 23 to 29% of that 1.2%. So not
Oh, I
29%
see.
New
Right.
Zealanders
Okay.
of that group of
This is
people.
of those who take it. Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. So
So,
we've seen essentially what I'm trying to say is there's been a pretty big stepped increase in the frequency with which people are consuming methamphetamine among the people who use it.
okay, the numbers, you thought, well, in 2023 anyhow, that roughly 54,000 adults, um, while most are not regular or dependent users, have just noted, roughly 54,000 adults are at risk from health, social, or legal harms as a consequence of this. Would those numbers be the same today on the basis of the wastewater evidence, do you think?
We don't have any evidence that points to a growth in the number of people that have consumed it. Of course, there's new entrants and people who leave it behind, so there'll be that aspect. It'll be interesting to see in the coming year or so with research whether we see a growth in the number of people who are consuming it. Often those people aren't going straight to addiction, they're using it infrequently, so we might not see some of the acute harms from them per se. But at the moment, we don't have any evidence that suggests there's been a growth in the number of people consuming it, which again is
Mayor,
really worrying, isn't it? Because you're talking about a lot more meth, twice more meth being consumed by a very small number of people.
well, we talked to in preparation for these sequence of interviews this week, Mayor Moko Tapania of the Northland District Council, and he says that the Kaikoui, for example, wastewater testing shows that meth use there is 4 times the national average, and in Kaitaia it's 5 times the national average. Um, can I ask why, when you are in socially deprived areas and money is tight, presumably, and life is tough, methamphetamine consumption has escalated to these rates? What's the correlation, please, between poverty and straitened circumstances and drug taking? Why do people in those situations seek to really make their lives worse?
Yeah, so there's a few different things that you're bringing up there, and I'd really like to dig into one of them particularly, but I'll just start with a couple of things. The areas that have had the biggest growth really are Northland, Eastern, Waikato, and
Mm,
Auckland.
mm.
They're the four areas. And in fact, if we'd done this interview 6 months ago, I would have hand on heart thought it was Waikato that was leading out of those four. So these things do change a little bit, but those four are much more prevalent. And I think that the next thing I'll just touch on is why people use methamphetamine. People use it for a different range of reasons. Firstly, especially those infrequent users, that they just use it to have fun. They might use it to mask trauma or problems that they're having in their life. They might use it to work long hours or to do unpleasant work. It has that effect, and that cuts across a number of different socioeconomic groups. In fact, all of those so far do. We also have people who use it because of I think deprivation definitely does play a factor, and let's speak to that next. But I think the other thing that we've really become more aware of in recent years, thanks to a bit of research that we've done and looked at international research, is that people with ADHD are very, very likely to take illicit stimulants. So according to the international literature, we don't have domestic literature on this, but since we started talking about it, we've had a lot of people come forward, including people in the sector, and talk to us. But about half of the population who take illicit stimulants potentially have ADHD.